Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
Pain means pause on the things you love, but green means go. Cool the pain with BioFreeze. Powerful pain relief for sore muscles and joints, simple backache, arthritis, strains, sprains, and bruises. BioFreeze. Fast-acting menthol pain relief. Visit biofreeze.com. The #1 clinician-recommended menthol topical pain relief brand, based on a survey of clinicians, chiropractors, podiatrists, massage therapists, physical therapists, retail pharmacists, and athletic trainers. Ipsos Clinician Survey. Use as directed.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits, including personal shoutouts, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and more. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note, sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. When I was a kid in the 90s, I remember watching a television show which included a segment on a strange phenomenon. People were seeing the face of Jesus everywhere. Clouds, tree bark, soap suds, even toast. Back then, I found the claims to be exaggerated and the instances of Jesus' appearance to be more coincidental than supernatural. An NBC News article dated December 1st, 2011, stated, quote, "We're wired to pay attention when we see objects that remind us of something we already know. Our brains automatically identify similar objects and then organize them according to type. That's why we can look at a baseball cap and a fedora and know right away that both are hats." End quote. At the risk of confirmation bias, this makes sense to me. Because when I see Jesus' face showing up in random places, it always looks like the pictures I saw of him as a kid. But then, inevitably, there's a part of me that wonders, what if this is really Jesus' face? What if this is truly miraculous? I suppose those are the questions people in Belmez, Spain have been asking for over 50 years. In 1971, something strange, and possibly paranormal, occurred in a small house in a small city. Residents claimed, quote, "Images of extremely unsettling faces appeared in the concrete floor of the house." End quote. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the unsettling and scary Belmez Faces. Are these alleged faces truly paranormal? Were they made by a spirit or spirits? Or Are these faces the work of human hands, and nothing more than an elaborate hoax? I'll share the details. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Belmez, Spain, might be the definition of a small city. With a population of just shy of 2,000 people, it's located in southern Spain, and at first glance, appears to be the least likely place you'd expect to find paranormal phenomena. On August 23, 1971, Maria Gomez Camara was in the kitchen of her home when she noticed something odd. A strange stain forming on her concrete kitchen floor. The stain was unusual, but nothing to be alarmed about. Thinking perhaps her husband or son had made a mess, she attempted to scrub it away. But nothing made a difference. The next day, the stain was still on the floor. But this time, she noticed something different about it. It didn't look like the same stain from the day before. It had changed. What started as something unusual quickly turned into something frightening. Quote, a human face forming spontaneously on her concrete kitchen floor. End quote. One article described the stain as turning into, quote, a disturbing face. Not only that, but the stain appeared to have moved positions. End quote. The face resembled a creepy woman, and Maria did what most of us would do in a similar situation. She tried to scrub the stain away as quickly as possible. But no matter what she did, nothing worked. The disturbing face seemed to be etched into the concrete floor. Eventually, Maria's husband and son destroyed the floor with a pickaxe and quickly re-cemented it. This seemed to solve the problem, and life went back to normal for Maria and her family. However, a few days later, the face returned to the original location. This time, over freshly laid concrete. And even scarier, the face reappeared alongside other faces. One article stated, quote, along with the woman, there were several other faces, all of whom were adults. Some would stare, others would cry and scream. End quote. Word of the strange phenomenon spread throughout the small city, and quote, everyone talked about the House of Faces, end quote, which drew interest and visitors to the house. It seemed folks wanted to get a first-hand look at the faces in the home. But the residents of Belmez grew increasingly frightened by the strange occurrences, and many claimed the home was cursed by the devil. For their part, Maria and her family, quote, thought it was a ghost or spirit trying to communicate with them, end quote. Uncertain of what to do, the mayor of Belmez took drastic action to preserve the face and eventually prohibited its destruction. Hoping to understand what was happening in the home, he asked permission to investigate, which Maria and her husband quickly agreed to. Like the others, they too wanted to know what was going on in their home. A few weeks later, the portion of the floor containing the face was cut away and preserved behind glass, and a deeper excavation on the floor began. What they found was fascinating. Excavators dug nearly 3 meters deep, and on December 2nd, 1971, quote, brought human remains without skulls to light, end quote. The discovery was startling. Several decapitated skeletons resting under the floor where the faces had appeared. It is believed the home was built on a graveyard, but this could not be corroborated, as, quote, there was no local history matching these bodies being located there, end quote. Several skeletons were dated as far back as the 13th century. Some of the residents of Belmez believed the faces and decapitated skeletons belonged to people who, quote, would have been murdered brutally, end quote. Maria was convinced the faces belonged to, quote, people trying to tell her something, or that they were trying to identify themselves to them for having died either a brutal death or not being buried according to proper religious rites, end quote. The remains were eventually transferred to a local cemetery, and the floor was once again re-cemented. And the hope was the transfer would end the scary phenomenon in the home. For a while, things returned to normal. But then, just like before, more faces appeared on the concrete floor. One article stated, quote, during the first year, new faces occurred about once per month. One characteristic was the dynamics of the formations. They manifested themselves at different speeds. On some occasions, directly under the eyes of witnesses, and sometimes disappeared again, or changed their appearance, end quote. These faces appeared for the remainder of Maria's life. She passed away in 2004 at the age of 85. Even now, 20 years after her death, the faces continue to appear. Dr. Hans Bender, a renowned parapsychologist who investigated the Belmez Faces, described them as, quote, without doubt, the most important paranormal phenomenon of the 20th century, end quote. But for over 50 years, investigators, believers, and skeptics have asked the same question. Are the Belmez Faces real, or just a hoax? From the onset of the phenomenon, various theories have been put forward to try and explain the Belmez Faces. A January 2019 article by Gerhard Meyer offers 4 hypotheses. Quote, the religious hypothesis, a religious miracle. This theory was favored by the local population during the first months, but was, however, never officially supported by the church. 2. The conventional hypothesis. Pareidolia as a perception psychological phenomenon, i.e. perceiving faces in accidental patterns of stains that naturally occur on concrete floors under such environmental conditions. Fraudulent manipulation of existing stain formations on the concrete floor, and fraudulent production of the faces. Third, the paranormal hypothesis, a psychodynamic RSPK interpretation, with Maria as a focus person. And fourth, the spiritualist hypothesis. Maria serves as a medium, seemingly supported by the results of Argumos's EVP experiments. Alonso distinguishes between a classical and a new spiritualist theory. While the first refers to the fact that human remains were found during the excavation in the kitchen, and the house is assumed to be built on an old cemetery, the latter proposes that the faces are produced by innocent victims killed during the Civil War in 1936 and 1937. End quote. Something interesting. According to Psychology Today, pareidolia is, quote, a phenomenon wherein people perceive likenesses on random images, such as faces, animals, or objects on clouds and rock formations. It is not a clinical diagnosis, nor is it a disorder. The brain has a tendency to assign meaning wherever it can. Seeing a rabbit in the clouds, or an animal, instead of leaves in the brush, is a commonplace experience of pareidolia. End quote. In some ways, this helps explain the strange sightings of Jesus in burnt toast or in tree bark. But is it possible this explains the Belmez Faces? Think of it this way. Would visitors to the home have seen faces on the floor if they hadn't been told about them prior to arriving? Are the Belmez Faces actually human faces? Or are they stains that our brains process as human faces? The same Psychology Today article stated, quote, confirmation bias may have some influence on how we perceive. We see what we want and expect to see. Also, if we are looking out for meaningful patterns, we are likely to see them. End quote. For those who believe the conventional hypothesis, they claim Maria and her family, quote, used some kind of paint or chemical agent to create the images as a way to draw tourists to their house and turn a profit. End quote. Jose Luis Jordan, vice president of the Spanish Society of Parapsychology, claimed the Belmez Faces were a hoax, stating, quote, with regard to the enigma of the chemical procedure, I solved it by discovering that this compound can be found in any drugstore by asking for a German product to remove concrete stains. The mystery that the images were invisible for some time is hereby solved. End quote. Something interesting. Shortly after the faces were discovered, various investigations occurred in the home. In June 1972, quote, 2 teachers from the village and another person from the local public authorities visited the place and detected a newly developed face. End quote. The investigations were thorough and subjected the Belmez Faces to a variety of methods in an attempt to prove or disprove their authenticity. No matter the approach, though, the faces continued to appear. Perhaps the most polarizing theory is the paranormal hypothesis, which was the preferred explanation, at least initially. One article stated, quote, from February 1972 onwards, the mass media became very hostile towards the Belmez case and its parapsychological interpretation. End quote. Maria was believed to be a psychic and medium, and that somehow she was channeling the spirits whose faces appeared on the floor of her home. Others claimed Maria was capable of a unique ability, Thoughtography, which is defined as, quote, the claimed ability to burn images from one's mind onto surfaces, such as photographic film, by parapsychic means, end quote. After her death in February 2004, quote, it was supposed they were due to her that the strange occurrences were taking place. The faces would stop appearing after her death. Psychic researcher Pedro Amoros wanted to see whether any more strange faces would form in the Pereira house after Maria Gomez's death. Amazingly, more faces did form even after her death, end quote. While it is likely we will never know for sure whether the Belmez Faces are real or not, there is one mystery that remains. It's been 20 years since Maria Gomez passed away, and yet the Belmez Faces keep appearing. If they're a hoax, as the most ardent skeptics claim, who is behind it? Today, it's another unanswered question in a list of unanswered questions. I'll admit, when it comes to the Belmez Faces, I lean on the side of authenticity. A quick Google image search for the Belmez Faces reveal what clearly appear to be adult human faces etched in stone. The pictures are unsettling, and some of the faces appear to be smiling, while another seems to be screaming. There are faces of men and women alike. Is it possible I'm experiencing pareidolia? Sure. Is it possible these faces are a hoax perpetrated by a family desiring wealth and fame? Sure. But if that's the case, why hasn't that been proven definitively? And why have the investigations come back as inconclusive? And there just seems to be too many coincidental factors. The decapitated skeletons directly under the floor where the faces appeared, and Maria Gomez's supposed psychic abilities. For me at least, the Belmez Faces sit firmly in the liminal space between natural and supernatural, normal and paranormal. They're genuinely creepy, and I could assure you, if I woke up one morning and saw a face etched onto my floor, I'd react as if I'd seen a ghost. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. Are these alleged faces truly paranormal? Were they made by a spirit or spirits? Or are these faces the work of human hands and nothing more than an elaborate hoax? I've shared the details. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.